अभी processing आ रहा है. Good evening, everybody. Welcome all the audience to another session, another day of continuous integrative medicine updates. Today, we have decided to modify our interaction to a different level of whatever we have been talking in last 102 days about yoga, practical sessions, about Siddha, homeopathy. We brought in the world leaders to talk about the concept framework of these pathies and why the integration is so important and how it should be done based on evidence. And we had sessions from spiritual gurus who discussed about the values of mindfulness, mind-body connectedness. And this way we spend the entire uninterrupted continuous educational series focusing again and again by highlighting the importance of evidence in our research in pursuit of integrated healthcare for bigger human health and improved healthcare, cost-effective healthcare. Today we are joined by um, Professor Subhash Lakhotia, who is a very well known in Indian biology, not just Ayurvedic biology. And he has agreed to be with us for this interactive session, which will take us to a level where I will call it a more of a practical interactive session, where our audience, all of you from interdisciplinary spheres, will learn how to carry out research. So we will ask him some questions, and those questions will be useful in prioritizing research and designing our studies and to know what is the value of Ayurvedic biology. So I will formally introduce Dr. Lakhotia. Professor Lakhotia, although he's a very well-known name, he's the fellow of the academies in all three academies in the country. But I will like him to be introduced also because a lot of us from outside India are there from disciplines outside Ayurveda and outside biology, whom we try to bring in the fold under this singular umbrella. So Dr. Lakhotia is a distinguished professor and an SERB distinguished professor at Zoology Department of Banaras Hindu University. SERB is a Science and Engineering Research Board set up as an arm of Department of Science and Technology under Ministry of Science and Technology. His current research interests using Drosophila model are cell stress related gene expression in development, particularly HSR omega inc RNAs, stress proteins in tumor development, neurodegenerative disorders, and Ayurvedic biology. So he uses a unique combination of Ayurveda, the biological tools, and particularly Drosophila as an animal model. As you may know, it is one of the very favorite and good model for studying neuroscience, and for that matter, any biology, and especially gene expression and assigning functions to genes. Establishing Drosophila as a model for cell and molecular biological studies on actions of standard Ayurvedic formulation, he has significantly contributed to Ayurvedic biology and provided a new stimulus to active research directed to understanding cellular and molecular mechanisms of action of Ayurvedic rasayanas and other formulations. So Professor Lakhotia leads by personal example. He is a strong votary of promoting high quality of research journals published in India. And he has written many, many articles and organized discussions and meetings on these issues related to quality higher education in the country. I remember having met Dr. Lakhotia in one of our Neuroscience Academy annual meetings in Amritsar 4 or 5 years back. And it's such a pleasure to see him live, if not physically, at least online. Uh, Further, in recognition of his contributions in research and education, he has received many awards and recognitions, including fellowships of all the three academies, as I mentioned. And he's also been awarded as the INSA Young Scientist Medal, the UGC Career Award, UGC JC Bose Medal, INSA Aryabhata Medal, Jhandu International Oration, which is given for Indians. He got one for the Indian citizen category for excellence in research contributions for Ayurvedic, biology, and natural products. The CSIR, which is one of the apex agencies of Government of India, has given him Shanti Swaru Bhatnagar Prize, which is one of the awards that are given to scientists below age of 45. So during those times, it's a very prestigious award. And this was given to him back in 1989 for his contributions in biological sciences. He's an editorial board of many journals, including Annals of Neurosciences, Journal of Biosciences, Cell Stress and Chaperones, RNA Biology, and he's also our ombudsman for this particular journal, which has been doing this continuous education series for last 102 days, which is Integrative Medicine Case Reports. We take guidance from him, and very recently, or rather very shortly, you will be hearing more about his ideas through an editorial that is coming out in our journal. So let us get started with him. Welcome, Dr. Lakhotia. This is a Facebook platform, as you know, and thank you for joining. And we will be, although we will be seeing each other, but I assure you that a lot of people who are not visible will also be able to hear us out or see us through Facebook. Typically,
it's a pleasure to be part of this interactive session, and I look forward to exchanging ideas.
Good. We are very fortunate and we are excited to have you here. So we are now, as I mentioned in the beginning, changing the pattern and the format of our discussions. And we will start right away from question 1, which I thought will be very useful for our viewers, because a lot of them with good ideas and enthusiasm are left stranded, not knowing how to proceed and how to use the tools of modern biology for investigating the depths of Ayurveda, or for that matter, any Ayush system, including our own biological research questions. So, Dr. Lakhotia, what is Ayurvedic biology, and why is it important in the current context in which the Ayurveda is placed today?
Okay, you see, Ayurveda has a great history, long history, but that history has created some problems in current times, because when this was compiled by Charak thousands of years ago, it has been a remarkable compilation for that time, and so detailed that I don't think even our current pharmacopoeia can often match the detail that Charak has compiled. But his ideas were based on the knowledge available at that time. And since that time, Ayurveda has gone on mostly through oral route, and then more recently through written form in Charak Samhita. But then what we must understand is that if today's Ayurveda practitioners make use of that compilation as it was at that time, without any modification, without any change, there's a problem. And this is what has happened. In current times, or almost last 200, 300 years, there's been hardly any creative research in Ayurveda.
Another day of continuous
Hello. So the question is
that, go ahead.
Yeah, in the absence of active research, knowledge remains static. And even Gandhiji, way back in 1920, has stated something that, particularly in context of Ayurveda, that something that stays static is dead. And that's what, unfortunately, the Ayurveda seems to be today. Although we talk enormously about Ayurveda, there's great importance and great potential and a great knowledge in India, but we need to be aware of what is its current status. And it is in this context that the idea of Ayurvedic biology, which was initiated by Professor Valyathan, who was a cardiothoracic surgeon, a very well-known cardiothoracic surgeon at Trivandrum, who thought that Ayurveda needs a better understanding. And he started early in 2005 or 6, the idea that we need to start Ayurvedic biology. What Ayurvedic biology aims to do is that we understand cellular and molecular basis in context of modern biology, modern physics, modern chemistry, modern material science, and so on, about the various practices like Panchakarma, yoga, and the formulation like rasayanas, bhasmas, and so on, that firstly, to experimentally verify whether they act what they are supposed to, and secondly, to understand how do they act, so that we can think of a better way of therapy. The basic idea in Ayurvedic biology that we start with unbiased scientific research. Not that we want to prove that it works, but we just want a basic question that if a given rasayan is known to or used for something, does it really act that way? Or And if it acts, what is the mechanism? So that, we can make better use, we can even repurpose the same formulations. And in the process, what is important is that we can differentiate between myths and facts. Over 3,000 years, lots of myths have gone about. For example, one of the basic questions that Ayurveda talks about, and which I know many will not be very happy when I make this comment, that basically they say the whole life system is based on Panchamahabhuta. But then Panchamahabhut concept was developed by Charak and others in those times when they did not have as much knowledge about the universe, about the biological system, about the matter, about everything, about our sense organs, how do they act. And so they gave a general concept, which is great by itself. But today, if you want to understand and make use of Ayurvedic practices, we need to understand life in as we know biological systems. And that's where we need to modify. And I think Ayurvedic biology is aiming to do that kind of a thing. And that's where active research is a must in Ayurveda. Then only we can bring back the glory that it had at one time. We cannot go on feeling ourselves glorified because our great ancestors were glorified. We must develop that glory on ourselves. And we must understand that in modern context, so that the great idea that exists in Ayurveda, the great pharmacology that exists in Ayurveda, we can make good use of it. That's what I think is Ayurvedic biology about.
So in essence, Ayurveda biology helps us to refine our knowledge and advance further to the areas and mechanisms which were hitherto not explored at the times when this took shape, when the concept of Ayurveda was positioned into our system.
Yes, but you see, the point is, we will never know on what basis Charak and the other great Ayurveda acharyas of that time came to the conclusion that they have written down. We will never know that. What kind of research they did, what kind of understanding they had. But what we have, that great knowledge available, the treasure of knowledge that is available, we need to revalidate, re-examine, and thereby, if necessary, modify. If necessary, some concepts may have to be thrown away or modified, and so that we can make good use of the legacy that we are carrying in a very useful manner, and so that it from experience-based science, it becomes experience and experimental evidence-based science. That's what is important.
So thank you for putting that in the context. But now let us move to having known that there are problems of biological reductionism, but now moving to how to do it. Now we have in your audience here yoga scholars, some of them are PhD, some of them are masters, some of them are just without any qualifications. There are people from Unani Siddha here, maybe some are just physicians, the MBBS, MDs, others are PhD in biology, in engineering as well, people from IIT, All India Institute. About 20% of the viewers are supposedly outside India. A lot of them are yoga practitioners. Some are having formal degrees. So if I were to take a talk on their behalf and ask you, how do we engage these yoga scholars, and how do these yoga or this interdisciplinary people out there, which I just defined for you, how can they take forward the research and ask more questions so that it is relevant and they are able to validate the claims that they are seen making and then made fun of because apparently it doesn't have a basis, or if they have, they are not able to articulate it using scientific knowledge. So I had this passion that since the healthcare has not got solutions for all the diseases, and we could look at this treasure. You mentioned biological systems provide that tool system, but if we engage these people and if they become research oriented, can they become research oriented, number
Sure,
one, with or
sure,
without degrees?
sure, they can. See,
Then how can they become?
yeah,
Yeah.
right. The thing is, Ayurvedic biology is not just biological studies. It is actually a truly interdisciplinary study where experts in all areas, all domains, be it physics, be it chemistry, be it engineering, technology, uh, biological sciences, chemistry, Ayurveda practitioners, yoga practitioners, modern medicine practice, all need to collaborate. It has to be a real collaborative, open collaborative exercise, because see, when we talk of, let's say, Panchkarma, now there are effects which work through the brain, which work through our behavior, which work through our consciousness, and which work through physiology and body anatomy. Now, all of them need to interact to understand what exactly this does. And I think it's not necessary that one has to have a formal degree. Unfortunately, the way we do academic research, we require formal degrees. But it is possible that we can interact formally, informally, get ideas, and get to do things. And that's where what Ayurvedic biology or this research in Ayurveda, to understand Ayurveda, we need a real open collaborations. The more important point is that the Ayurvedic practitioners, yoga practitioners, or any Ayush practitioner have to come out with an open mind, not with a closed mind that what they do is established. Because then research doesn't progress. Research always starts with a question. Question, is it true? If it is, how does it work? And that open mind is necessary. And I think if we do that, we will really have a great system with participation of so many diverse disciplines, diverse brains. It can have a tremendous future. The question that happens is, how do we prepare our future Ayurveda practitioners? The ones who have been trained, they still have time to open up, to understand the basic question that yes, we need to ask questions, we need to look at. But the young ones who are coming up, which are being trained, I think we need to change our pedagogy. First of all, right from childhood, we need to inculcate the sense of curiosity. And then our basic degree training in BMS or whatever degrees are, I think we need to teach them, besides the Ayurvedic principles of biology, particularly physiology, genetics, developmental biology, cell biology, plant physiology, so that we can understand them better. And when they do their MD research, unfortunately, most of the MD research that happens today is for namesake. I'm sorry to say this, but that's my experience, that much of it is just something to be written and you get a degree. That should be real. We have tremendous manpower available doing this. And if we can harness that manpower effectively, we can really make great progress, not only in Ayurveda or Ayush discipline, even in modern medicine, the same applies. I'm sure you know it better than I do, being in a medical research institute. But that's what my feeling is. And therefore, participation of all disciplines, of all kinds, is most welcome and should be done in an open way. I mean, it's possible. You see, for example, today, if we had to write an Ayurvedic research proposal, we need involvement of an Ayurvedic expert also. And whether, now, typically it should be a person who is established with an organization, academic organization, but I'm sure many NGOs can also participate if they have that proper mentor mind to ask questions and to participate. Because as a biologist, I may know to do this thing, but which formulation to take, what is expected to do, how it is expected to, that an Ayurvedic person only can help me out. And that's where collaboration becomes very important.
Yes, thank you. You rightly mentioned, being in a medical institute myself, I have the privilege as well as barriers in terms of regulatory approvals, because I do have to go through ethical committees. I have to write a grant to get enough money to do the Ayurvedic biology research. But these people out there are working in the clinics, they are in studios, and if even if they have been with us, about 10,000 of them are subscribers to this channel, and presumably they've been watching us, and probably they have cultivated some scientific temperament. Maybe they are preparing themselves for the research, but without access to the ethical committees, without having access to writing a grant or even obtaining a grant, uh, you mentioned that they should collaborate, but eventually where will they publish such a data without ethical guidelines or
No, you see, the collaboration will also require ethical clearance. That is a must. That we cannot avoid. In any experimental on animals or in clinical trials will need ethical clearance, which is necessary. But this is where the academic people who are in academic institutions, it becomes their primary responsibility. They have to collaborate, and the collaborating practitioners may not be themselves having ethical committee, but they can be members. I think every institution allows that you can collaborate with people who are with established NGOs or other academic institutions. Yes, just a freelance practitioner may be difficult. Unfortunately, that's what the regulations are. But under certain conditions, even that may be possible if that person has a certain standing. And publication-wise, I think once we have gone through the whole process of ethical clearance, a whole process of formulating a grant, getting the funding, because funding is a must. We can't do research without funding. And funding comes either to the private institutions, but any academic institution that has a research lab, has a funding, will have ethical committees. And I think Ayush can help there in ensuring that these things happen. But what I must say, Ayush must also help is not start with a biased mind that we have to establish this. No. Ayush must start with an open question, open mind, that let's ask whether this is true or this is not true. And if it is true, then what we need to modify our understanding and how we can modify the formulations, how we can effectively use them. So that unbiased collaboration, unbiased question, to my mind, is the most important point to be followed.
Also,
I
like
don't know
we
if that,
said,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, please go ahead.
I mean, I'm not sure if I could answer your question fully,
No, I think
but then
partly yes. For the yeah,
ethical committees are a must that we can't do away with. And some
maybe joining a NGO which has an ethical committee will be useful.
no, no,
Collaboration
no,
will be
no, no,
useful.
no. Ethical committee will be for the academic institution. If they will have to have, because they initiate the project, they start the idea, and then the NGO can join in, and that shouldn't be a problem, in my understanding.
Correct. And we would like to use this opportunity to inform our viewers that our own journal, Integrative Medicine Case Reports, at least caters to a single individual before and after effects with our yogacharyas and other Ayush systems are experiencing, because single to one or two or three based on informed consent, the observational N on one trial is possible without ethical approval that can just be obtained in the form of informed consent. And that kept set the ball rolling for others to take it to the in collaboration with the animal model or to other biological experiments.
Right.
We'll move to the next question that comes to my mind. Well, a lot of viewers are joining in from happy to see you speaking, Divya Singh, Jayashri Upadhyay, good to see, probably one of your postdoctoral students or a former student. Then there is one Dr. Ishwar asking in Hindi. I do not understand, but I will still read it. Maybe you can get an idea. Otherwise, if he is listening, he can articulate his question again. He writes, "Andgaj न्याय के कारण दुविधा है." I don't know what that means.
Andhakar?
अंधगज अंधगज न्याय के कारण दुविधा है. I don't know if maybe it is
I also
something
couldn't
else.
make out what
If
it
Dr.
is.
Ishwar, if you are listening, please type it again. I will read it out for you. But he puts in another question here. Ethical committees usually are unethically stopping research of those whom they don't like.
That's that's a difficult question to answer. That's more of human problem than the problem of the ethical committee itself.
Uh,
This is something that we face every day in and out, that we have people who will put more obstacles than promote. But basically, ethical committees are not to put obstacles. They are meant to put to promote such activities. And I hope that they do it by and large.
Right, but he has a pointed question, and a lot of viewers are listening. Please, with your own vast experience of being on both sides, advise something if it happens. How does the researcher respond to it? How does he look at it?
Well, you see, the problems are certain kinds of regulations. They become overboard and become too stringent and impractical. For example, even the use of animals for research has gone on to an extremely unpractical situation. That has been a serious question which we have been talking about, and I hope it becomes more relaxed. But then, in the name of cruelty, we do not know what cruelty can be, how can we define? That's a different issue. But then ethical committees, to my mind, yeah, they should take a proactive, supportive step rather than inhibitory. But then certain practices, sometimes we do know that there are things happening which even after ethical committee clearance become unethical. So these are very difficult, abstract questions which cannot be defined by in rules and lines and so on, but these have to be appreciated by people who sit in the ethical committees. And when an ethical committee is constituted, there are certain people who they have ex officio, but then certain people who become members must be selected on basis of their liberal outlook, not an outlook that is kind of dictatorial or restrictive. Problem with the Irish research is that very often the projects or plans that are made are not unbiased. They are made with a certain bias that we want to establish this thing, and that's where comes a problem. For example, if I may say, there have been a number of so-called clinical trials in Irish discipline in last 3-4 years and more recently as well. But some of these clinical trials have really, they say there's preliminary clinical trial. Now, first of all, I don't know what is meant by preliminary trial. A trial is a trial. And if it is preliminary, then don't make a conclusion that this is what is shown. And this is where I think by doing this kind of claims, we do more damage to Ayurveda than to promote these sciences. We must be unbiased, we must be honest, we must be clear. And that's where ethical committees also become important. Government has, Irish has certain regulations. Of course, typical clinical trials are meant for new medicines also. But in case of Irish research, it's not new medicine that we want to do clinical trials. It's established formulations that we need to do it. And I think Irish should make very clear guidelines about this, that how these established formulations, established practices that are there, Panchakarma or others, how they should be going through clinical trial. And I think that needs some discussion and some brainstorming to make sure that it becomes facilitatory than inhibitory.
Sure. Thank you. I'm interrupting you because I have to accommodate questions that are now beginning to shower in. Surabhi Mishra asks, acceptance of papers in international platform based on Ayurvedic medicine is really difficult. And I agree with her. How can we solve this problem, if at all?
Well, you see, partly the problem is, let me tell you my own experience. For example, we were using Ras Sindoor into soft flies. Now, Ras Sindoor has a mercury as metal, and most of the Western world will not touch it because mercury is one of the most toxic. And unfortunately, what has happened is, and this is where Ayurveda is suffering because of lack of quality control. Commercial interests have taken over, and we make these formulations which may not contain what they're supposed to do or may not be prepared in a proper way. And therefore, the first question that when we sent these manuscripts out was, how can you use Ras Sindoor and claim its benefit because it's most toxic? We have to establish that if it is properly formulated, properly prepared as is traditional method, it is non-toxic. Fortunately, there was later on a study from BRC which did XRD analysis, biophysical analysis, material science analysis, and showed that Ras Sindoor, the way it is formally prepared, mercury cannot be reactive in the body system at all. But because most of the formulations that we use have this problem that they are not quality control maintained, and that's where most journals are vary, and because very often our experimental design is not unbiased. And this experience of trying to publish our own results and coming back with reviewers' questions again and again, it is a difficult thing, yes, because of the bias that exists, that Ayurveda is an experience base and there is no scientific basis, and so we are in a vicious circle. We need to first standardize our own methods, and of course, for me, it's important point is it should be published in good journal. As you know very well, I don't care for Indian versus international journal. To me, a journal is a journal, whether published from India. This distinction that we often make in our country, national and international journal, to me is a complete nonsense. We must look at a journal, its good practices, and I know for sure, even if a paper is published in Indian journal, so-called Indian journal, in the internet era today, it gets more interest. And so I have no problem that international journal must publish it. I know, if I can have a minute, when we wanted to publish our effect of complex rasayan and Rasindu on neurodegeneration, I think it was a great finding. And Professor Valiath and others suggest we must send it to international, so-called international nature neuroscience and neurobiology and so on. And each one rejected it without any questions. They just rejected it, that we can't believe this thing. We published in Current Science. Some people were unhappy that why such an important discovery was published in Current Science, but I think it had been picked up very well. Only thing where I feel a little sad is I thought Ayurvedic practitioners should now start clinical trials, because these drugs can really suppress neurodegeneration. We showed it in mouse model also later on. And I think Ayurvedic practitioners must make sure the clinical trials are taken up these, because these are repurposing. As I understand, they are good for brain and so on and so forth, but they can have such specific effect on neurodegeneration was not known. And I think it can be a good thing to start with by our practitioners.
In fact, yesterday we had Dr. Sunil Kaul from Japan
Yeah,
speaking
yeah,
about ashwagandha and its various active moieties.
that's right.
Some useful for cancer, others useful for neurodegeneration, as you mentioned. So yes,
Yes,
clinical
yes.
trials are important and they need to be taken by our Ayurveda acharyas. But the question will be, another question that'll come to my mind when you say this is, when should they start this research in their own career as an Ayurveda acharya, when they get trained as a BA, MS, MD, when they get to practice in clinic, or when they are established as a professor? So
Well, you see, the research should start right. The idea of research must be inculcated during the BMS research. But then to MD, they must be involved in real rigors of research. That's where they start with. And then once they get out, they become practitioners or they become academic start, but they must collaborate. They can't do it all on their own, because they are not so well trained in biological system, on physical system, chemistry, and so on and so forth. And that's where they need to understand this very well. And that's where biologists or physicists and chemists must understand and collaborate. And that ability to cross communicate is most important. And I think there's no barrier that you attain this status and then only you do it. Research is something that can be done by any curious mind.
correct. So we have Dr. Ishwar coming back. The question that was asked in Hindi about andhagaj, andh and gaj meant actually he's explaining the elephant. There is a tail. One is trying to hold on to its tail. The another person is trying to hold on to its leg, and another one to his trunk. So no one knows what they are touching, and that's the problem of, I think, Ayurveda and for any biology, I would say. What do you have to say for that? Any comment on that?
That's true. See, knowledge base keeps on increasing. At this point, each one of us can describe one thing in one part, somebody who's expert in another part will describe that part. But that's where we need integration. And I think Ayurveda needs that integration today much more than any other discipline, because it has to understand human health, human body. It has to understand the basic of various practices that we have. It has to understand and explain the herbal preparations, herbal metallic preparations, their chemistry, the material science, why we use some anupan for one formulation and another anupan for the same formulation. Why? I think these need to be understood rather than just go by empirical. And this is where that blind man describing an elephant applies everywhere, not just Ayurveda, it's everywhere. And we need a good integration, which will come only when we collaborate and we understand each other's language.
Correct. So the way you built the importance of biology, and then how the so-called naive Ayurveda Acharya, Yoga Acharya should take up research and collaborate, to the most important and pertinent question, how do they frame their question? How do they know what to work on? In other words, what are the outstanding research questions which can be addressed by Ayurvedic biology?
Well, I think there are two important questions that come to my mind immediately. One is the practices like Panchkarma or the various massages. We have gone by experience, all right, but we must understand what are the physiological, immunological parameters, and that requires a serious study. And that's where Ayurveda Acharyas can collaborate with physiologists, with immunologists, with other health practitioners, so that they can monitor at what stage, which activity, which process does what. And of course, we need psychiatrists, we need neurobiologists, because Panchkarma, as Ayurveda very rightly says, is not just treating a disease, but it's a whole system where we talk of brain, body, gut, behavior, microbiome, and everything connected together. And therefore, we need this collaboration. That's one area where these practices can be a serious and very useful issue for research. The other is where is rasayanas, bhasmas, and kasayas, and so on and so forth. Why? First of all, they're described to have these effects to be used in certain conditions, and we can create these conditions in various animal models. That's fortunate that biology has, that's where biology can contribute enormously. We can have today biological models for most of these conditions, human diseases, human conditions, be it in mouse, be it zebrafish, be it Drosophila, be it Caenorhabditis, and using these models, we can examine how these formulations actually act upon. We can use cell cultures. So there are numerous ways that we can do it. But once we catalog them, that okay, these are the effects that we see, then we can correlate with what is the prescribed Ayurvedic usages. And maybe some of them will turn out to be more of myths, but some of them will turn out to be real reality. And this will have one more consequence, which a very critical consequence, that is quality control. Because most of the Ayurvedic formulations are complex molecules, complex mixtures. And therefore, to say that it contains these chemicals is not possible. But if we can have biological parameters that, okay, these are the biological effects, then those can be good quality control. For example, I can tell you some of the Ayurvedic formulations we purchase from different brands, and some of them had a certain effect in biological system as were expected, but others were toxic. Now, this is where I think biological quality control becomes very important, that one can identify whether a given preparation is properly made, improperly made, has some adulterants. And I think these are the kinds of questions that Ayurvedic biology will tremendously help in establishing and bringing back the glory of Ayurveda as it should have been.
So in a sense, you're saying the importance of implementing quality assurance regimen into the Ayurvedic biology. And I would say, in fact, to most of biology or research, basic research, experimental setups to make data auditable, back traceable, with a lot of blinding, validation, and archivable, and retrievable, and auditable.
Right.
So that increases.
I may like to add one more point. A very common way of people claiming that they are doing herbal research or Ayurvedic research or herbal medicines is using active principle. I personally think Ayurveda doesn't agree with active principle. Ayurvedic formulations believe in a complex system acting on a complex body, which has its psychology, its philosophy, its behavior, its body, microbiome, and so on. And therefore, to say that we search for an active principle, historically, if you look at modern medicine, started with this active principle search, that the herbs that were used in Ayurveda or other traditional medicines, they were examined, chemicals purified, and so we synthesize these molecules and do a reductions approach. But that's where the modern medicine has suffered. This reductions approach, that we have a targeted point, a parasitic molecule or some molecule, and we target a particular molecule on that and inactivate it and so on and so forth. Ayurveda doesn't believe in that. And I think Ayurveda biology, what I would suggest is, instead of working on active principle, we must work on the prescribed, described formulation as they are. And then find out if we can modify them, we need to understand their effectiveness. And then with that knowledge, we can go on to modify and develop newer formulations. But for that, we need, first of all, to understand the basics of the existing formulations. And I think that that can keep us busy for large number of years, because thousands of formulations are described even in Charak Samhita, and maybe later on they have been added more. And to systematically arrange them, to identify them, biological effects, it will need a very large force. And I think Ayush Ministry must come out in a large way to promote this kind of studies on a large scale.
And that even more highlights and flags the issue of quality assurance, because there may be
Yes.
batch to batch variation, lot to lot variation, which is not
Absolutely.
so, or it is minimal in synthetic drugs, where lot to lot or batch to batch variation is presumably a little less than the Ayurvedic complex
You see,
standardized extracts.
yes, you see, biological control, I can just share again my experience without taking names. We tested a number of brands of Chyawanprash, one of the most commonly consumed Ayurvedic formulation in the country and world over. Several brands were really toxic. Drosophila larvae died within 3 days, but they are sold. Now, this is where quality control becomes very, very critical and very important. And I think we can do an enormous service if we can develop such kind of quality control measures.
There's another question from someone asking Mr. Krishna, what would be the interest of major private industries that manufacture Ayurvedic medication in a shared and collaborative research? How do you propose that this issue can be overcome?
Well, the problem with the private, the manufacturers of Ayurvedic medicine is, unfortunately, most of them are commercial. They are only interested in making money. And that's where Ayurveda has gone into a disrepute because of the lack of quality control. But if they really want to serve Ayurveda, they should really come forward, promote such active research and academic institutions to real, and then you see, initial investment will, in the long run, will be a great dividend, not only monetarily, but also philosophically and for the good of Ayurveda and any Irish system. And so the private industry must come forward in a big way, but make sure that the research that they carry on, that the support is unbiased. That's the most critical point that I think has to follow. The private industry must come forward. It is in their interest.
Sure. There's another one from the Facebook. I'm sorry, there was a little bit of interruption in your, when you were speaking, your voice was breaking up, but now it is okay, I think. Chandrasekhar Kabra asking, how is our clinical trial, whether of Ayush or the regular standard drug, how it compares to what is happening in clinical trials in our country versus developed countries?
Well, I mean, since I'm not a clinical person, I can't really tell you very precisely, but in general impression is India has been used as guinea pig for clinical trials in many places. And clinical trials, whether they are modern medicine or Ayush things, unfortunately have bad reputation. We have had, because of the enormous money involved, stakes involved, they are not done in a pure academic manner. But and that's what we must make sure. We must have clear regulations. We must have clear punitive actions also when things go wrong. Unfortunately, that's where we do not have that system in place properly. And so anybody can come and say, we did a clinical trial and claim many things. And this, we know, we had happened in recent times, in COVID times, many clinical trials were claimed, but then they turned out to be not based on solid science. And I think that's where I won't say that it's bad in India, it's global problem. As an outsider, I can say I'm not involved in clinical trials at all, so I can't say firsthand, but from ringside view that I have, most of them are not in a good shape.
Maybe quality assurance is also required in
Yes,
that, more blinding
exactly,
and
exactly,
third party
exactly.
involvement. Maybe in the clinical trials, yeah, please go ahead.
A larger sample, well documented sample, clinical trial.
I think your voice,
Studies where they said they examined.
Your voice broke down. Can you repeat?
That some clinical trial claimed 30 samples, 30 cases, 30 patients. Now, that's not statistically significant kind of, which can have a basis. So we must have something much more statistical power to the trial itself.
Maybe involvement of statisticians and basic scientists
Yes,
in the
yes,
clinical trial
yes.
is not a bad idea. By
I,
collaboration.
I think it should be a must in most cases.
Someone asking Mr. Anand, Ayurveda does not believe in OTC medicines. Is it true?
What is OTC? Over the
I have
counter.
no idea. I have no
Well,
idea.
generally OTC is over the counter, but Ayurveda believes in OTC. Anybody can go and buy something from in any of the shop, and that can sometimes be a problem.
It should be given by an Ayurveda acharya is probably what the person means.
The thing is that there are certain Ayurvedic formulas which are gone on by practice, and everybody knows, okay, these are something. And much of Ayurveda also is what we call as grandmother's medicine. The grandmother medicine, we don't need a prescription. These are experience-based. But what we need to do is we need to develop evidence for those experience-based ideas. We need to check up that, okay, what we take as grandmother's medicine or over-the-counter medicine that we can buy, we need to establish experimental evidence that, yes, that's what it does or it doesn't do, either way.
Correct. So thank you for that answer. And then with the very good comments, I was stuck to those. People very happy. We are glad we brought you here. Chandan Kumar is saying, humanity will never forget your contribution towards Indian international science and society. And I myself admire your passion for quality, for relentless investigative mind. And so we are very glad to be talking to you. And I have to say that to keep the viewers attentive, there is that attention time. So we will move to, despite fact that there are many questions here, move to the fundamental question of how can research in Ayurveda biology, and this will be our last question, how can this research be useful for integrated healthcare?
Well, you see, I mean, that's true. What I said was that we need integrative, collaborative research involving all disciplines. Now, what I think is modern medicine had developed remarkable diagnostic tools, which Ayurveda acharyas can certainly, and I know that they do use it openly or otherwise, but that's something that if once they understand good human physiology, human anatomy, these remarkable tools can become integral part of Ayush system as well. And what we learned from reductionist approach of modern medicine can also be understood, can be used to understand the actions of traditional Ayurvedic formulations. And once we do that, and the main thing in Ayurveda, where it differs from the modern medicine, is the personalized approach, the Tridosha concept. The Tridosha, unfortunately, right now is more of a phenotypic variable, which is subjective. But if we do, and that's was something that I should have mentioned, then the kind of biology can contribute, genomic, microbiomic, proteomic, immunological, physiological analysis of different human constitutions, what we call a Tridosha, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Each one has the if more in terms more in terms of real genetic combinations and so on, then their identity becomes very specific and objective. And combine that with the Ayurvedic principles and modern medicine system, I think total thing that comes out can be really remarkable. This is what I've argued in one of my articles recently, that we need integration, and that integration can happen only if each side, say modern medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, they often appear to be competing with each other. Instead of competing, they should be supplementing. Modern science, Ayush practices, and modern medicine, they should complement or supplement rather than be kind of competitors which are trying to destroy each other. That shouldn't happen. And then
So
we can have good integrated healthcare.
countering. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but someone is allow me to accommodate some interruptive or rather defining comments. So someone countered while you were saying integrative. I asked you in that way, if it is how does Ayurveda biology help in integrated healthcare? There's a philosophical counter that shouldn't it be holistic rather than integrative?
Well, you call it holistic integrative. I think it's a question of semantics. The point is that patients need a complete care, whatever system can provide. But if we can take the best of each system, our healthcare system for the masses become much more comprehensive, holistic, or integrative, whatever you call it.
Correct. You're right. And now another suggestion that came out from some Krishna is that perhaps the Ayush Ministry should lobby for the tax benefits for private players to participate, fund, and collaborate in the R&D.
Well, I think tax benefits are already existing. Whenever a private industry contributes to academic research, I'm sure they have tax benefits. So, but I'm not sure about this. I mean, I do not know, but I understand that there is always a tax benefit for R&D spending on any private industry.
Maybe more for Ayurvedic biology, Ayurveda industry
Well,
than the.
see, I don't think that kind of reservationist approach will help. That you promote one versus another. What we want to promote is good holistic research.
Correct. Very nice. Very nice. So I have another list. I already ended with the last question, but taking the integration or the holistic aspect further, we talked of Ayurvedic biology, we talked about the regulatory aspects, how to define research questions, and degrees don't matter as long as they collaborate and they can report and do studies by define research questions. But in order to do good clinical studies, clinical trials on Ayurveda drugs, it requires, you will agree with me, require bigger and bigger samples. And institutes such as NIMANS or All India Institute have come up almost in every state. There are PGIs in many, many states also, and our PGI is there as well. They see thousands and hundreds of thousands of patients every year.
That's
And that
right.
is sort of a sample. N is very big, statistically very appealing. Is it not natural for a policymaker to install the Ayurvedacharya and Yogacharyas inside these institutes as professors of Ayurvedacharya, so that when these patients walk through endocrinology clinic, neurology clinic, cancer clinic, they automatically participate in N-on-1 trial using the same paraphernalia of MRIs, the CT scans, the infrastructure, and the autoanalyzers of biochemistry or other laboratory infrastructure to which government has been funding to the tune of thousands of crores, then automatically this data and this discussion will become operationalized at the ground level. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, see, these are good thoughts and they should be practiced, but our problem is compartmentalization. You see, for example, if you recall, we jointly wrote an article in Annals of Neuroscience some years ago, and one of the points that we raised was that to promote good research in medical institutions, we need good scientists also there. Right now, we have serious problem between medico and non-medico. And then you want to add Ayurveda versus Ayush versus modern medicine and the basic science. Now, this is our mindset. And unless you get rid of it, see, I sometimes say we follow many things from US blindly, but we don't follow good practices. For example, tell me any research institution in US which is outside a university. They're all part of university system, but tell any research institution in India which is part of university, we have compartmentalized, and that has really put us to a very bad situation. And that's where our neither academics nor research is making the mark that it can and it should. And I think that it's necessary that we talk of policies where practitioners of different disciplines, as long as they are sincere in what they are doing, as long as they are open in their thoughts, should work together. And then, yes, there will be real integration. Otherwise, we'll remain fragmented and separate.
Are you suggesting that the overarching higher education board, I think there is some news that has come up as an overarching body above pharmacology association or a medical association or council, as whatever you call it, is a good
I'm
idea?
sorry, I don't believe in overarching higher body, because then they become more and more regulatory. What we need is internal regulation, self-regulation. That's more important than a higher body, because on one hand, we talk of greater autonomy to academic institutions and so on and so forth, but at the same time, we put an higher and higher levels, more and more levels of regulatory bodies. The two can't go together. And you see, we have already many regulatory bodies. They're not serving the purpose. What we need is, firstly, good manpower who is interested, competent, and good infrastructure, which can support quality research and quality teaching, and of course, good administration, which is not necessarily the administration from the outside system. Within system, we need administrators who understand the value. I mean, coming from BHU or being in BHU, I can recall Madan Mohan Malviya, not an academic person, but the kind of administration he provided for 20, 40 years of the initial period of BHU made the world class without any governmental support, without any governmental regulation. So that's what we need to understand, that if we are doing bad, we can blame others, but we need to examine ourselves. What are we doing and how we are doing? And I think once we do that, as the classical thing says, Swanthay Sukhay Bahujanitay. You must have passion, you must have pleasure to do what you're doing. And that's what, if we can think of that kind of integration, I know it sounds philosophical or something that is good to think of but difficult to practice. But I think we need to try, make a serious effort that some of this can be put in practice.
And you already inspired everybody by giving Mohan Malviya ji's role modeling in your own institute. Yes. And we need more role models. Yes. We need more sustained research, good scientists, integrity with merit and ethics. And I think evidence will eventually help to integrate, or whatever you call it, holistic.
And remember, when I talk of Malviya ji, BHU was funded by every Indian, not by government. Every Indian donated, contributed to what BHU is. Even a beggar donated. And that philosophy we must remember. When you talk of private investment, it must come in. They must feel partnered with these institutions. It's not that they are giving something, but they must think that they are partnered in building of these institutions. And when that partnership link comes in, things will work much, much better. That's the way I think of it.
So with that, we come to the very, yeah, sure, no, excellent. Very nicely you put your thoughts. And now we'll move to the actual very last question from the Facebook viewer, asking how valid is the Divya sense of Ayurvedic therapy while everything else goes under scientific scrutiny?
I don't know what the Divya means, but
it looks like it looks like ethics, maybe.
No. You see, we must not confuse ethics with superstitions with religion or religious dogmatic views. I personally don't believe in that kind of dogmatic views or religious views, but ethics is something different. Ethics is good human religion, good human philosophy, good human being. And as long as we do that, as Ayurveda says, if your mind is happy, your body is happy. And to that extent, if anything that gives you satisfaction, pleasure, your body will remain better. And to that point, I agree. But I wouldn't believe any kind of superpower or something that makes us better. No, and that's what I personally do not believe in that.
I think all scientists have to have a cognitively neutral mind with no biases and no alienation towards a particular dogmatic belief. Only then we can progress objectively and based on what the evidences are. With that, we come to the end.
Mind essential.
Yeah. You want to have a last concluding remark for everybody?
No. I will just say, keep your questioning mind. A child is the most remarkable scientist. A toddler, one is curious about everything. Unfortunately, we lose that curiosity as we grow up. And that is something that we need to sustain, constructive curiosity. And once we do that, honestly, it will be much, much better world than what it is today. That's
excellent. That was such a beautiful description, and it actually concluded the entire session. Before we end, I would like to inform all the viewers who are just holding on that our journal Integrative Medicine Case Reports, it entertains all good quality, ethically obtained data, before and after effects of your yoga interventions, Ayurveda interventions, Ayush interventions, We entertain good research articles, which is subjected to standard peer review. Professor Lakhotia is our ombudsman, which means anything I do wrong or anything goes wrong with the editorial board or functioning of our journal, he is there to take care and find a recourse, a solution from him. So we are very proud to have him. Apart from being the ombudsman, he is our national glory. And I think we touched you very nicely, touched and explained every answer to different questions that were coming from the Facebook, from me. And I think we had a great session, and I would like to thank you on behalf of
Thank you
our
so much.
entire
Yes.
editorial board, from entire Facebook audience. And I hope we reconnect again to have another session as a follow-up session, maybe later, a couple of months down the line. Thank you very
Well,
much.
it will be my pleasure. Thank you all for arranging this and for interacting. Thanks.
Thanks.
All the good wishes. Thanks.